On YouTube, on our YouTube page, and also on our Facebook page. But as I say, just bear with us a few more minutes whilst we await for the arrival of the Minister.
That's what the people told me, so she talking. What is it?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ambassador Ed Beesbrook, Head of Delegation to the European Union to Trinidad and Tobago. Senator, the Honourable Paula Gopi-Schoon, Minister of Trade and Industry, Trinidad and Tobago. Mrs. Roberta Reid, Senior Advisor of the Office of the Executive Director of the Caribbean Export Development Agency. Mr. Adam Wisniewski, Trade Policy Manager of Cooperation at the Delegation of the European Union to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean, the OECS, and CARICOM and CARIFORUM. Mr. Ramesh Ramdeen, Executive Director of the TTMA and also our board member at Caribbean Export. Members of the private sector, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming this morning. I apologise for being a few minutes late. However, I think we have got everybody that needs to be here. We are also streaming live on YouTube, so welcome to everybody that is watching us on YouTube and on our Facebook page. And I think we should really just push on and get started in the interest of time. So I'd like to invite our first speaker to the podium, Mr. Ambassador Ade Biesbroek.
Thank you very much. Senator, Honourable Ms. Paula Koopis-Koen, Minister of Trade and Industry, colleagues from diplomatic missions, Adam, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to this workshop. I'm very pleased to be here at the Trade and Investment Convention and to formally welcome you here to the workshop Leveraging the EPA and Business-to-Business event that is organized jointly by the European Union, and it is the delegation in Barbados as well as the delegation here in Trinidad and Tobago, the CARIFORUM Directorate and the Caribbean Export Development Agency. I strongly believe this event will allow us to better share information and experience on the opportunities that are available for the private sector and that arise from the application of the CARIFORUM European Union Economic Partnership Agreement. And I think, as you are certainly aware, one of the EPA's main objectives is to promote economic growth of the region and to gradually integrate the Caribbean states into the world economy. It aims to increase chances for the Caribbean businesses to participate in global value chains and supports the conditions for increasing investment and private sector initiatives, enhancing supply capacity and competitiveness in the CARIFORUM states. Achievement of these objectives cannot take place without involvement of the economic operators. They're supposed to be among the main beneficiaries. But I think they can also be considered as the owners of the EPA, and especially in terms of delivering against the EPA undertakings. The European Union's commitment to support the private sector and entrepreneurship in the Caribbean is not new. We have been supporting the diversification of the economy and the private sector in the Caribbean for many years as our main commitment under the EPA. And only a few months ago, in March, we launched together with the Caribbean Export Development Agency, the 11th European Development Fund, Regional Private Sector Development Program. And that program seeks to support private sector development, investment facilitation, and EPA-related activities. And this 24 million program that is available are intended to strengthen, in particular, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and they will support trade, investments, and export development throughout the region. In order to deliver effectively on those objectives, we need to take into account and address the real needs of the private sector. We need to focus on building the capacity at the level of individual enterprise through value chain actors, strengthening business support organization to assist firms to meet trade-related requirements, could be in quality, customs, etc., and reinforcing public-private and private-private dialogue to promote a more effective business enabling environment for Caribbean companies. No doubt governments create policies and conditions for businesses to prosper. However, in the end, it is the private companies and not the governments that create jobs and growth. Therefore, we should not miss any opportunities to reinforce the role of the private sector, building on key value chains in order to strengthen the competitiveness and the trade capacities of targeted productive industries and enterprises, and most importantly, to create more business links with Europe. This task cannot be based on one-time or sporadic efforts. Earlier this year, I had the privilege, and together with the Minister, the Honourable Paula Koopis-Koen, to deliver opening remarks during a similar event, which also took place here in Port of Spain, to try and maximizing export potential to the EU through the EPA. And I'm very happy to see that the idea of promoting EPA's utilization among private sector operators is gaining in momentum. The EU is committed to organizing similar events and business-to-business sessions that allow for increasing exportability of Caribbean companies, but also for intra- and extra-regional business matchmaking regularly and throughout the region. And to this very end, we will work hand in hand with the relevant CARIFORUM national and regional authorities, regional and European businesses and business support organizations, with CEDA, national chambers, associations, and agencies. The delegations, the one in Barbados, which is entrusted with regional responsibility for EPA implementation, as well as colleagues in our headquarters in Brussels, are available to assist to ensure that your respective private sectors reap the benefits of EPA implementation. I wish you all an extremely fruitful workshop and business-to-business session, and I'm sure that this very event, together with the events of this kind that will come in the future, will allow you to increase your business dealings with Europe and contribute to further integration of the Caribbean industries and economies into global value chains. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I realised actually I didn't even introduce myself, but my name is Joellen Larrier. I am also with the Caribbean Export Development Agency, and I will be your MC for today if you didn't already realise. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mrs. Roberta Reid to give her remarks.
Good morning, Senator, the Honourable Paula Goopy-Schoon, Minister of Trade and Industry, Trinidad and Tobago, Ambassador Ad Beesbrook, Head of Delegation of the European Union to Trinidad and Tobago, members of the audience, private sector, exhibitors, buyers, media, we welcome you today. I'm actually standing here representing the Executive Director, Ms. Pamela Cook-Hamilton, who unfortunately could not make it today, but she does send her best regards. Caribbean Export is extremely pleased to be able to host this workshop with the European delegation this year within the context of TIC. For those of you who are not familiar with the agency, we are the regional trade and promotion agency for the region. We represent 15 member states, including Trinidad and Tobago. And we have a very good relationship with the business support organizations here on ground in Trinidad with the TTMA Export TT. And we hope to build additional relationships with others on the ground as well. As the Ambassador mentioned, we have recently begun implementing the 11th EDF Regional Private Sector Development Program, and I want to just talk a little bit about this program this morning. Under the 11th EDF, there are three main objectives that we will be seeking to achieve. The first one speaks to building private sector capacity at the firm level in order to increase export competitiveness. Under this objective, we will continue to focus attention on building private sector capacity through increased use of green energy alternatives, ICT to foster productivity, and increasing access to sustainable financing mechanisms. Under the 10th program, which recently concluded, we have done a number of initiatives under this particular objective, including training, awarding direct assistance grants to companies, and working with BSOs to also strengthen the ability of the companies to export. So the second objective under the 11th is to strengthen the business support organization's capacity to provide greater support to the private sector. In this regard, we'll be strengthening our efforts on providing trade and business intelligence and building the capacity to conduct research, market research, to help our companies, and increasing understanding and use of the EPA, and hence why we are here today, and other market opening agreements. One of the key objectives today is to really help the private sector to understand what are the opportunities under the EPA. We have already started to begin breaking down the agreement and putting it in in a language that the private sector could appreciate, so that they can clearly appreciate the opportunities that exist for them. So you will be hearing later from the consultant that we have begun to work with to break down the agreement, Dr. Noel Watson, and he has a wealth of experience, and I'm sure you will have lots of questions, take advantage of the opportunity here today. We also have Mr. Adam Wisniewski, I hope I pronounced that correct, from the EU delegation in Barbados, and he is also going to be sharing with us a bit more on the agreement. The third objective is to strengthen regional mechanisms aimed at promoting effective public-private dialogue. To this end, we have started under the 10th, which will continue, the CARIFORUM EU Business Forum, which normally brings together public and private actors to discuss issues that concern the private sector so that we can address them. We also try to integrate business-to-business meetings there so that it adds additional value so that companies get to enter new markets through the forum as well. So you can look out for those initiatives in the near future. So today's workshop is really on helping firms and business support organizations to gain a better understanding of the opportunities under the EPA so that we can have an increasing number of companies exporting to Europe through the agreement. I won't go into the details of the EPA because you will have lots of that coming up. So I just wanted to say welcome on behalf of Caribbean Export, and we really do hope that we do have a productive meeting here today, and we are available to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberta. I'd now like to invite the Senator, the Honourable Paula Gopeskun, Minister of Trade and Industry, to give her remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Let me recognize His Excellency Aaron Riesboek, whom I've been seeing quite a bit this week, Mr. Adam Wisniewski, the First Secretary of the Trade Affairs Manager of the EU Delegation to Trinidad, Barbados, and the Eastern Caribbean states, Ms. Roberta Reed from the Caribbean Export Development Agency. Thank you for coming. Dr. Noel Watson, Ms. Mary Lou Norton-Ray from EuroTT, Mr. Christopher Alcazar and Dr. Ramesh Ramdeen from the TTMA, who is responsible for today's event in a sense, for coordinate together with the TIC 2017. All of the representatives of the European Union, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the TTMA, members of the media, welcome again, and very happy to be here and to share this event with all of the private sector stakeholders who are with us as well. It's a pleasure to be here again this morning to deliver the opening remarks at this workshop entitled Leveraging the Economic Partnership Agreement. The EPA is one of the most comprehensive trade agreements ever negotiated by the region, and its implementation, of course, is of critical importance to the region and in particular to us here in Trinidad and Tobago. The workshop aims at promoting the use of the agreement, and it is timely, and I hope that we will achieve the stated objective and that we'll be able to assist businesses to better understand the agreement. As you're aware, October 2017 probably will be 7 years since the signature of the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement in October 2008. And this agreement has been provisionally applied by Trinidad and Tobago since December 2008. We are currently taking advantage of opportunities that were negotiated, but not enough. And the question is, why not? And how could we try to move forward with this agreement, with further implementing the agreement? Under the EPA, we have negotiated the best opportunity for export expansion and economic development to aid the region's trade and investment trust with the European Union. Moreover, it is the only agreement that includes provisions for trade and services. Too often, trade agreements are negotiated, but utilization continues to be minimal, and we have to fix that. Trinidad and Tobago's non-energy exports to the EU over the period 2009 to 2016 increased significantly from approximately 0.5 million in 2009 to 2.1 million in 2016. Moreover, Trinidad and Tobago's non-energy imports from the EU increased consistently from $3.6 million in 2010 to $7.3 million in 2016. And we need to swing that balance a little bit more in our favor. And these statistics demonstrate that whilst there's some utilization of the agreement, there is opportunity to do a lot better. And definitely a more aggressive approach is required by all of us. It is our understanding that this session is the first of a series of workshops expected to take place in the region, and that will promote networking and business-to-business meetings with local, foreign, regional buyers and potential business partners. Furthermore, these fora will inform participants on increasing the market penetration of Caribbean products into Europe through the EPA. Let me just say that it was an excellent decision to choose this venue, the Trade and Investment Convention, to launch these workshops. Based on analysis of the recently successful Fit for Europe project, and I've spoken to it, I am certain that these seminars will encourage the private sector here to use the EPA. The Fit for Europe project was funded under the 10th EDF and implemented by Export TT. It involves sensitization to market requirements, capacity building, and market penetration missions. The project was successful. It was a good start to penetrating the EU market and achieved notable results, such as the appointment of distributors, interest in immediate orders from participating companies, packaging and labeling upgrades, and identification of strategic partners in animation and co-creation initiatives in the creative sector. And that's just to name a few. The Fit for Europe project has demonstrated that market penetration is a real opportunity. It's all very possible under the EPA. It is my expectation that through this workshop and the business-to-business meetings, collaboration and dialogue between the CARIFORUM states and the European Union will be improved. The further implementation of the EPA will not be viewed as a challenge, but rather through the networks and partnerships developed, allow us to understand the requirements and to discuss the resolutions to alleviate any barriers to trade encountered along the way. I recognize that there are several EU investors present, and I'd like to assure you that the government is currently undertaking the necessary steps to ensure its compliance with the EPA. Furthermore, substantial work is ongoing to enhance our single electronic window, which has improved trade facilitation and the ease of doing business in Trinidad and Tobago. Activities such as implementation of a risk management system for customs and excise, business process re-engineering, and modernization of trade laws will facilitate greater efficiency in business operations. There's much to be gained from this CARIFORUM EU EPA, and I certainly would like to encourage all members of the private sector to use the opportunities negotiated under the agreement to discover new customers, form new partnerships, and constantly pursue new growth prospects to diversify exports and markets and to build competitiveness. In closing, I'd like to extend sincere appreciation to Caribbean Export Development Agency and the European Union delegation for facilitating this economic partnership agreement workshop at the TIC. I would also like to thank all of the participating firms for their interest, their time, their dedication, and willingness to be a part of the session. I can assure you that through your involvement in today's workshop, you will become aware of many of the ways to effectively utilize the EPA. And I therefore want to challenge all of you to seize the opportunity to take that leap into this relatively new market. Let me say that it's a business imperative for Trinidad and Tobago as we seek to transform this economy. It becomes incumbent on all of us, private sector, public sector, to really get all hands on deck to ensure that we do take our products out of Trinidad, ramp up our outputs. It's the first step. I've spoken yesterday at the TIC about automation and to ensure that we can be competitive and the numbers are there so that when we discover the markets, and we've been doing a lot out of Trinidad, not only through the European market, but certainly into Chile, into Costa Rica. We have to implement the Panama Agreement. We are just going to make every effort. The Dominican Republic, to which I think there's another mission coming up soon, but we just have to focus on making sure that trade becomes a significant contributor to the GDP of Trinidad and Tobago. And so therefore, every effort is expected. And of course, I join with our Caribbean counterparts in ensuring that their GDPs are also improved through the trade numbers and exports out of the region. Inter-region remains good, but we got to get it out there. We have the products. I think we have the capacity. And again, through automation, we've heard a lot about the productivity issues, but I think through automation and innovation and technology, we're going to be able to take that quantum leap and increase the numbers and get our goods out there. We got to work on it, and the government is standing by and working along with the private sector to ensure that we do just that in the quickest of time possible. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the success with today's program. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Senator. Now, before we get started into the actual workshop itself, I'd like to invite Mr. Ramesh Ramdini just to give a few words.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson Jolene. Members of the Head Table, Minister, President of the TTMA, Mr. Christopher Alcazar, Directors, Adam, my good friend, Roberta, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, P.S. Norris, who just walked in, feel free to join us. P.S., you could come up to the front here. We have a very integral person, actually, in the negotiations of the Economic Partnership Agreement. P.S. Minister is asking that you could come. Yes. Oh, confirmation of yes. Congratulations, PS. Let me be one of the first people to congratulate you. As I said, Ms. P.S. Norris is one of the most integral person we have in Trinidad and Tobago and resource personnel who was very instrumental in negotiating the Economic Partnership Agreement for us in Trinidad and Tobago. It allows us to have an agreement, as the Minister rightly alluded to, that is very comprehensive, that speaks to more than just trade in goods, but trade and services, and a number of different disciplines. TRI, trade-related issues, government procurement, competition policy, anti-dumping, is a wide spectrum of disciplines that was negotiated. The Minister alluded to the fact as well that this agreement was signed since 2008. We are in 2017, and we need to get this model that is one of a kind in the world, not just the region, that is very comprehensive. A number of other countries are looking at us, other countries like the ACP member states, because they themselves are signing economic partnership agreement, and they have reached out to me from the private sector perspective to find out how we engage the process, what we did, what mistakes they could leapfrog in the process, and we are all for helping and collaborating with these people. So, on behalf of the TTMA, I welcome each and every one of you to the TIC Trade Show to be part of this session, and as well, of course, to partake in touring of the floor and see all that we have on offer. Trinidad and Tobago manufacturers are on full show. Feel free to ask all questions about production capabilities and standards and everything there you need to know about production and manufacturing in Trinidad and Tobago. We welcome you to that event, and as well, this evening, we have a cocktail for all business people at 5 to 7. Please join us at the cocktail. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Randim. There have been a couple of changes to the actual agenda, which I'll just talk you through now. We do have Dr. Noel Watson, who will be giving his presentation on increasing the market penetration of Caribbean products into Europe. But before that, what we would like to do is give you an overview of the Economic Partnership Agreement. And this will be presented by Mr. Adam Wisniewski, the Trade Policy Manager from the European Union to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. He will do that overview because, unfortunately, Dr. Aria Ascola, who was due to come in from Brussels, unfortunately wasn't able to make the flight. the day before. So those are the changes that we'll have. And I'd like to, obviously, first of all, introduce Mr. Adam Wisniewski. He has been working with the European Commission since 2007 in the Directorate General for Taxation and Customs Union. He's also worked with negotiations of rules of origins and fair trade agreements within the Latin America region. And before coming to Barbados, he was in the trade section of the EU delegation to Brazil. So I'd now like to invite Adam to give his presentation.
Thank you, Dilo, and good morning to everyone. So, as mentioned, we will start with a quick overview of our economic partnership agreement, and my presentation will be followed by a presentation by Dr. Noel, who will present more specific benefits or practical opportunities for the private sector under the IPA. So let us start with the IPA itself. The presentation will explain briefly what and why IPA was concluded in the first place. We'll present its specific features and characteristics which make the IPA unique or special when we speak about trade agreements and trade arrangements. And I will also explain its core trade-related elements. And we'll finish the presentation with a mention of ownership of the IPA, and we'll say a word or two about IPA's implementation. Let us start. So, what is an IPA? So basically speaking, this is a new type of trading relationship between the EU and the Caribbean countries, which is not based on unilateral, non-reciprocal preferences from the EU as the previous arrangement under the Cotonou Agreement. In its bigger part, it's very much like any other free trade agreement, but its goals and aims are much more far-reaching than any free trade agreement in the world. Its goals are not simply to increase trade between two regions, but to contribute or to reach sustainable development of the region through trade, using trade as a tool, and to include the region into world economies and world global value chains. For this reason, IPA contains various of specific characteristics and features which are not met in any other agreements, and which allow for achievement of these goals, contribution to development of the region. So I have to mention, and I will mention it more than once throughout my presentation, it's asymmetrical trade liberalization. It means that we are committed to do much more than we expect from the region in terms of opening for trade and services from CARIFORUM region. We also promote regional integration of the region, and this is simply because if you are a part of regionally integrated economy, you have much bigger chances for success in the European market, or for that matter in any other global market. And in the end, we cannot forget that all this is serving an overriding purpose, which is a sustainable development, and for which we partner in our IPA, just to make sure that the region benefits the most from the trade arrangements with the European Union. I will skip quickly to the characteristics of special characteristics of the IPA, which makes IPA unique and somehow special. I said that I will mention it more than once, and speaking about asymmetric opening of trade. So this means that as our markets were open for goods from the region as of day one, we allow the region for a phase-out period of 25 years for opening the market. It means that it will allow you for adjustment, and it also takes account of a different level of development between the EU and the Caribbean regions. The asymmetry is also included in the MFN clause. The MFN clause is a standard part of any trade agreement, and in basically speaking says that the parties will grant each other any more favorable treatment in subsequent agreements with any third countries. So this is what the EU commits towards CARIFORUM countries. However, the CARIFORUM countries will reciprocate with granting the same more favorable treatments in future agreements only with major trading economies. And this means economies which are of the size and level of competitiveness comparable to the EU. And in practice, it means that MFN clause will be binding on the CARIFORUM only as regards future and potential agreements with Canada and United States. MFN clause on the CARIFORUM side will not apply to any trade agreements and arrangements which are aimed at regional integration, or also will not apply to any instances of potential South-South integration. Then again, development cooperation. As I mentioned, ACP is not simply an FTA. It's an agreement that seeks to develop the region through trade, and development cooperation is equally important as trade and self-standing part of the EPA. Under regional cooperation, there are various forms of assistance. It's training, it's a technical assistance, also financial assistance, which is given which is provided by the EU to CARIFORUM institutions, to CARICOM, to national governments of the CARIFORUM states, but also to the private sector. And Roberta have just mentioned, and also Ambassador Biesbrook, the 24 million under 11 EDF program for the private sector development. Let me speak now about the core elements of the EPA. So this is back to the trade business, and as EPA in its bigger part is just a trade agreement. It has all the relevant parts, which are trade in goods, it's trade in services, and it also speaks or includes provision on other trade-related issues such as competitions, trade defense, public procurement, and such. Starting with perhaps the most important or the most traditional part on any trade agreement, which is trade in goods. We will start with customs duties. So then here we go again. Our market is open to the EU goods as of day one, whereas the tariff for European goods coming under EPA to the region will be eliminated, or are being eliminated, in the period of 25 years as of provisional entry into force. It means that the last wave of tariff elimination will take place only in 2033. And even after that, more than 10% of tariff lines, of 10% of trade will stay protected by the tariffs. So the most sensitive goods which are important for CARIFORUM economies are excluded from the tariff liberalization. As any other agreement, the EPA includes a part on trade defense instruments. So trade defense instruments are all the measures which parties are entitled to apply to fight against some unfair trade practices, such as dumping or illegal subsidies. And illegal subsidies, by illegal subsidies, I mean subsidies which are not compatible with WTO. So the agreement recognizes the right of the parties to apply these measures, and is pretty much standard provisions which are based on respective agreements under WTO. It also has an extremely important part of, on rules of origin, and rules of origin will be also tackled in Dr. Noel's presentation, so I will join him for this part of his presentation, but I'll only say now that rules of origin are rules that decide on something that can be called economic nationality of products, and they are decisive as they are important in the sense that they decide whether the given product qualifies for duty-free treatment under the agreement or not. When it comes to customs and trade facilitation, the agreement, there are provisions on enhanced cooperation on customs and also building on the European Union experience and expertise in this regard. So based on these provisions, the EU is able to modernize customs procedures in the region to make it more effective and cost and time efficient. It also promotes creation of certain trade facilitating or trade facilitation mechanism, such as single electronic windows, which are for imports and exports, which I understand is taking place or being implemented right now in Trinidad and Tobago, but also in other CARIFORUM states. When it comes to agriculture and fisheries, having this single out in the agreement is a consequence of special sensitivity that agriculture products and also fisheries have for the countries in the region. And the provision on agri and fisheries include, inter alia, the European Union commitment to eliminate subsidy for all the products in the EU, subsidy for all the products which are liberalized by CARIFORUM, and also provide for an obligation on the European Union side to consult with CARIFORUM an internal EU policy modification as regards agriculture and fisheries, and we do have a common agriculture and fisheries policy in the EU. As regards products which are most sensitive, which can affect products which are most sensitive for the region, and this would be banana, sugar, rum, cocoa, and 2 or 3 more, which I don't remember right now. Then TBTs and SPS are also traditional and regular parts of any trade arrangements. And in this respect, the provisions of IPA aim at creation of a regional mechanism for both TBTs and SPS measures. So there will be one set of rules applicable to products throughout the region. So it will make easier for you to export your products to other CARIFORUM countries. And we also try to contribute to the capacity building, to setting up the quality infrastructure, to make sure that there is enough of laboratories and certification institutions in the region. So complying and certificating the standards would be faster, easier, and less expensive, what in turn should should contribute to increased trade, both intra and extra-regional. Apart from trade in goods, the other, I don't want to say second most important because it's equally important, is the provisions on trade in services. And this is where IPA shines out among other agreements. This is the first agreement ever, not only the only IPA, but the only trade agreement that the European Union currently has that includes such far-reaching commitments as to provision of services. For this part, the EU made commitments for contractual services suppliers and to lesser extent to independent professionals in a large number of services sectors, including new sectors such as tourist guides, entertainers, artists, chefs de cuisine, and fashion models, but also professional services, which facilitate temporary freedom of movement to the European Union and allows them to provide services in the territory of European Union for the period up to 6 months in 27 sectors, if I remember well, as regards the contractual services suppliers, and in 11 sectors as regards independent service suppliers. CARIFORUM services companies will be also able to transfer management trainees to the affiliated companies in the EU, so they could, for example, acquire up to 1 year of working experience in Europe. The IPA also includes, for the very first time, a protocol implementing UNESCO Convention on Cultural Diversity. And this is providing CARIFORUM states and other CARIFORUM artists and other culture-related services suppliers with better conditions for the temporary movement of persons whilst in the EU. And which is also worthy to mention, the agreement includes a regulatory framework for mutual recognition of qualifications agreements. And this is important for such professions as architects, engineers, and also a number of medical professions. And right now, we do hope that based on these provisions, we will soon conclude the first mutual recognition agreement for architects, and that hopefully will be followed by the agreement for engineers. So this the representatives of these professions would be able to have their qualifications automatically recognized in the EU without any further procedures or formalities. Let us go to other trade-related issues. So apart from trade in goods and trade in services, there are, the IPA includes chapters on competition. And competitions does single out, identifies way of anti-competitive behaviors which are prohibited under the terms of the agreements. And specifically in IPA, it's limited only to restrictive agreements and abuse of dominant positions. Mergers and state aid are excluded, and the reasons for that is that mergers are not prominent in the region. And when it comes to the state aid, we recognize a need on the part of a CARIFORUM country to develop or to modernize certain parts of the economies or industries with the assistance from the government. When it comes to innovation and intellectual property. So under the agreement, intellectual property is not treated as a self-standing issue, but within an overall context of cooperation on innovation. So the main objective of integrating IPRs in the agreement is to promote innovation and creativity in the Caribbean. So the IPR chapter contains very detailed provisions on innovation-oriented cooperation in specific fields such as science and technology, but also information society, information and communication technologies, eco-innovation, and renewable energy. So all the sectors which are of primary importance for any modern and competitive economy. When it comes to the specific IPRs like patents, trademarks, or industrial designs, the agreement doesn't include any specific provisions. It rather refers to adherence or compliance with international instruments, international conventions in this regard. And it also includes a rendezvous clause for conclusion of EU CARIFORUM agreement on geographical indications. So as to that, the negotiations are very advanced, and we hope to have this agreement soon in place. And based on this agreement, geographical indications which are duly registered in Caribbean will be automatically recognized as such in the EU. Moving on to public procurement. When it comes to public procurement, the provisions of IPA are essentially based on transparency and predictability. So we want to make sure that the suppliers are aware of the tenders, public tenders, and that they are given equal opportunities to participate. We also want to encourage the creation of the regional public tender or public procurement mechanism. However, this is left to the decision of the CARIFORUM states, and it's something potentially for the future. And what needs to be said that although the Caribbean companies, the Caribbean suppliers have unrestricted access to the European Union public procurement market, to public procurement tenders, there is no such reciprocal obligation on the CARIFORUM side. So the EU companies, based on the provisions of the IPA, are not having access to public procurement in taking place in any of the CARIFORUM states. And in fact, as per the situation as it exists right now, not even other CARIFORUM states have access to public tenders taking place in other parts of the region. But for that, we aim at creating, or we want to give incentives for creation of these regional public procurement mechanisms. And last but not least, protection of personal data. This part of IPA simply spells out international standards in this regards, and it pushes for creations of regional mechanism of protection of personal data, and this is a condition for being successful in e-commerce, but it's also very important for efficient administration and good governance. So let us speak about ownership of the IPA. So the agreement itself was negotiated by the governments, and is up to governments to implement the majority of the biggest part of it. However, the ultimate beneficiaries and owners is the private sectors, the economic operators. So it's your responsibility to take the initiatives to capitalize the opportunities presented by the agreement. And even with capacity issues that certainly are in place, you need to make sure that you use those opportunities, because without this, all the IPA will be nothing else or nothing more as a thick pile of 2,000 pages of paper. And let me stress that we, as the European Union, we are a stable and predictable trade partner. What is not given in today's world, that today's world can be characterized by anything but stability and predictability. We are still 28 member states. We are 450 million customers, and we represent 25% of the global GDP. And most importantly, we have one set of trade rules and no internal borders or tariffs in the EU territory. So it will be very unfortunate if you guys don't use the opportunities which are provided by the IPA. And to conclude this part of this presentation, I will just mention where we stand with the IPA implementation in Trinidad and Tobago. So the agreement is in provisional application in Trinidad and Tobago and in the rest of the Caribbean except for Haiti. Officially, Trinidad and Tobago has not yet ratified the agreement, but it's provisionally applying it. TT has passed the legislation implementing the tariff cuts which were due in 2011, 13, and 15, and I understand that this legislation also includes all future tariff cuts, and the most recent is the one of 2017 that came to force as of 1st January 2017. I'm aware, or I understand that there can be some issues with practical implementation of these tariff cuts, but we are working very close with the governments just to make sure that there are no further delays or no hiccups as in this regard. So with this, I would like to finish my presentation, and as I mentioned, I will be joining Dr. Noel Watson for some part of his presentation. So thank you, and Noel, over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me well? I'm really glad to be here with you in Trinidad. Any excuse to come down here, I take. I'm from Jamaica, another beautiful island in the Caribbean. You have the soca, we have the reggae. Both very popular in Europe, and we need to get more soca into Europe as the reggae is doing well there. And just to say that we have taken a mission from Trinidad to Europe before to actually get business there, and I know that Kes got some gigs out of it. Ricky Jai also did quite well. So, you know, if we have to fuse the two genres, let's do it. Anyway, to my presentation before I get carried away. Adam has really given you the background on the EPA, and I'm going to try and give you some practical examples of how you can actually get into the market. Because as you see, it's an agreement with a lot going for it, but I'm not sure that the persons that need to benefit from it are so doing. So we are here to try and make it look a little easier for you to take advantage of, and I'm hoping that we'll be successful. So a few things that we're going to look at are the background and the components of the EPA. That will be done in a second because it was already done. I'll be looking at the EPA as a market, though, so you get an idea of how big it is. And I'll be looking at some opportunities because I know that's what you probably want to hear, because there are some real people from the CARIFORUM that really get into Europe and are really making money. Is there anyone here at the moment that actually exports to the European Union? We have one person. Okay. Two persons. Okay, well, that's great. 2 out of, however, okay. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, we'll have more than 2 persons that are leaving here to do this. We'll be giving some summary, well, in fact, we won't give the summary data, but what we're going to do is look at what you need to do to export goods and services to the European Union. This will include market intelligence, marketing. Marketing is very important. I spoke to a lady called Marie Sharp. Has anybody ever heard of Marie Sharp? Marie Sharp's hot peppers sauce from Belize. And I'm going to tell you her story a little bit as how she started from her kitchen and is now sending many full containers to Europe. And I will give you some other examples of success and strategic alliances. One of the ways to get into Europe, ladies and gentlemen, is not to try and do it by yourself. Strategic alliances with fellow Caribbean persons, as well as strategic alliances with people in Europe. And believe it or not, the Europeans are not against forming strategic alliances with people from the Caribbean, because I've actually been there, administered questionnaires, and they have told me that they don't mind doing business with somebody from Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, which is a good thing. Okay, so our objectives in this presentation are, 1, to simplify the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, and you had it simplified for you earlier. Oh, sorry, I need to use this. So we want to simplify the agreement. We want to help to make us, including me, realize that we can all participate in the EU market opportunities. We want to provide examples of success stories. We want to outline, however, and this is where Adam will help me, some of the requirements and regulations and steps to get into Europe. Because you can't just carry, you know, anything that you wake up with, I'm going to send it to Europe. It doesn't work that way. It's going to have to meet some standards. And at the end of this, we want to get your feedback as to whether we actually did simplify anything. And if we didn't, can you help us to how we can actually make it simpler to understand. Because our consultancy with Caribbean Export is to make getting to Europe simpler for persons who are not there, or for those who are there to do more. Okay, I won't talk about what is the EPA because Adam already did that. Adam already went through all the elements of the EPA. By the way, I'm going to let you have this presentation, and so if I skip through some of the slides quickly, don't worry, you'll have them, okay? Adam already went through that in his slides. I've got a diagrammatical representation of all the contents of the EPA, which has maybe a few items that Adam didn't have in there, but basically covers it. Okay, who are the countries in the EPA? Well, there are, at the moment, 28. You know, I mean, and some people are going to say, well, what about Brexit? I'm going to let Adam discuss that when you talk about Brexit, okay? Because, you know, he is our Brexit man. By the way, Adam and I are an example of CARIFORUM EU collaboration, okay? I spoke to him for the first time 2 or 3 days ago. I met him this morning. And look, here we are together doing a presentation. That is what I'm talking about, collaboration. He could easily have said, no, I don't want to work with you. But we're collaborating and we're going to work together. So you see the companies there, they go from Austria all the way down, Latvia to United Kingdom. And the languages that they speak, their populations are there. Now this slide here is an interesting one because it shows you the countries. And what I want to say to you is that it goes from Malta down in the south there to Estonia right up there in the northern part. Okay, now what are the advantages of that? Malta, by the way, is a lovely gateway to northern Africa, Tunisia and those countries. So once you get into Malta, and we went to Malta to look there, you can then jump over to Africa and start getting that advantage to a continent that has over 1 billion people. When you get into Estonia, you can start to access the former Soviet states and the Baltic states, okay? And I went to Estonia, very interesting place, okay? So even though they sound exotic and far, they are just a couple of flights away. Now, what we want to talk about here is when you make your decision to export, the first thing that you need to do if you want to export goods is do some market intelligence. Please, you know, find out what's going on. Because if you don't, as some examples we show in a little while later, you may end up sending a container over to Europe and not getting any money. You may end up sending a container to Europe and it cannot clear, okay? You have to find buyers, and as I said before, try to find some regional strategic partners if you can. Now, that's where the regulations come in over there. There are some regulations. You need to have insurance. You need to deal with customs. You need to deal with other trade-related issues that Adam spoke of. But you can do it. It's not as intimidating as you think. You just have to have proper guidance. You need to have a distributor over there on the ground because it's difficult. And remember, there are 28 countries over there. So each one operates a little different. If you're going into Italy, the rail transport is not as good. They do a lot more by roads. If you're going to Germany and some other countries, it's more by rail. So you need to understand this depending upon the nature of your product, because if you're shipping flowers, you may need to get it there quicker than road travel. Everybody with me so far? You need to get your EU buyers who receives the goods, and then you need to get paid. And it's not funny, you know, getting paid is what it's all about. And many people do not get paid, okay? Because wire transfers don't arrive, checks bounce, all kinds of other things. So you need to make sure you get your money either before or when the goods get there. I've spoken to exporters who've told me that when they send their container, they get into a plane and fly to Europe to make sure that when the container gets there, they're there, because the past experience, when the container got there, they were told that we didn't get anything. All the goods were bad. So they want to be there at the other end. Now, I'm not telling you that you need to do that, but you may have to take measures to protect yourself. If you decide to export a service, again, you need market intelligence. You might be an architect. You might be a consultant like me. You need to know what's going on. You need to find the European buyers, and you need somebody to promote you and get paid again, okay? So far for me, when I operate in Europe, I've got paid. I tend to work with large international agencies that tend to pay you. Now, I'm just putting this one up here because it's a hybrid. Because you may think that when you export goods, you're not dealing with services, but you are in many cases. And one of the things that I want to particularly pay attention to is that Pentagon there, and I'm not talking about US Pentagon, I'm talking about the one right there, IP-related issues, copyright, non-disclosure agreements. Don't take those for granted. And as the Marie Sharp case will show you in a little bit, Marie Sharp's product started under a name called Melinda's. And she had a wonderful distributor that took her goods into the state and then took the name for herself, for himself. So all of a sudden, one day, she woke up and found out that somebody in Europe, sorry, in the States, in her case, owned Melinda's. And had all rights to her products, to her exports. And I'll tell you what happened, what she had to do a little bit later. So we have to be aware of these things. Now, another thing why this slide is important, a lot of times the European companies find that Caribbean exporters can start off by exporting. However, when the demand gets high, all of a sudden, you can't meet it. I mean, I remember a case where a European company wanted some baskets, and because they wanted to fit pots in them, and they specified the dimensions of the basket. And of course, they came down and saw some lovely baskets in one of our countries and ordered a set. But the trouble is, once the baskets got there, and they tried to put their plant pots in them, some of them fit, some of them didn't, and the volumes were not possible, so we lost the business. So you understand that we have to make sure that we can get the quality. So one of the things that we can do is work with the European firms. We can work with them to invest with us, and this is where strategic alliances come in. They can invest in our firms because sometimes our small and micro businesses in this region complain that we can't get finances. That's a major concern, right? Well, sometimes the European companies have the finances. So if we do a strategic alliance, they can finance us, and then we will have a stronger firm and guarantee them the supply and the quality at the end of the day. Does that make sense? And these things, by the way, are actually happening, but we need more of it. We don't just have to collaborate amongst ourselves, we can collaborate with our trading partners. I mentioned earlier that Malta and Estonia were gateways into other countries outside of the EU. Now, while we cannot compete on price with imports from China, I mean, because sometimes I don't know how they do it, although having gone there, I do know. A lot of people in Europe are not looking for cheapness, they're looking for quality. Even people in China now are not looking for cheapness. They are looking for exotic things because there are a lot of very wealthy people in China now that want quality products. And the Caribbean actually has some quality products. So since we can't compete on price, let's not try to compete on price. Let's just try and compete on quality, excellence. And they like natural stuff, right? Because people are becoming more health conscious. And so if you speak to Marie Sharp, she says that her pepper sauce has natural stuff in it, not synthetic stuff. They like them to be made by MSMEs. They like them to be handmade. They like them to be grown in fair trade. Has everyone heard of fair trade? This is big in Europe. If you have, Tate & Lyle buys some of our sugar in the region. Why? Because we don't have child labor, because we don't use certain fertilizers, and therefore the product meets certain standards. And they pay a premium for that. They don't mind paying a premium. And the European buyer doesn't mind paying extra for it. And they like things to be made respectful to the environment. These things are important in Europe. So you can command a premium if you meet some of these requirements. Opportunities. They want flavors and ingredients that we have in our cuisine. Because the Caribbean is exotic, you know. When people see you saying bolt run, hey, and they see Michelle Montana dance and wine, they want some Caribbean wine. So we need to be in a position to supply it. And we have medicinal, nutraceuticals, and other products that are in high demand in the European market. Now, emerging countries in the EU should be targeted. Don't just look for your typical UK, France, Germany, the Netherlands. Because, yes, they know about us, but the others have heard about us. But sometimes, I mean, when I went to Estonia, some people had never seen somebody from the Caribbean. And what I loved about the Estonians was the following. When I walked towards them, they always acted as if I was just no one else, ordinary, just another person walking. They didn't pick me out, they didn't stare. But you could guarantee that if after you've walked past them about 20 meters, if you turn around, they are looking. And the look on their faces, because they just haven't seen that many people like us walking around. They've seen us run, they've seen us do things, but they haven't seen a lot of us. And if our products were there, they would love to try them, okay? And of course, go to Hungary, because the people there need food. Okay, opportunities. By the way, if you take your products to expos like people are doing here, when you go to Europe, you are actually able to sell them in the country in which the expo is. So you don't have to carry all your stuff that I see out there into Malta and then figure out how you're going to get it back here. You can actually, under the EPA, sell your goods there as long as they meet all of the conditions, okay? And as long as you agreed to sell the products during the exhibition and not before you got there. So you can't come up with some screechy deal where you arrange to do a lot of exporting before you leave. You have to, you know, if people come in the expo and want it, then you can sell it. So that's an opportunity. Now, opportunities through collaboration and strategic alliances. Now, one of our problems, ladies and gentlemen, is that we're small. But you know, if all of us in this room got together and combined our resources, we'd have quite a fairly decent-sized business. And if small businesses out there got together, they would be actually able to do a lot more. Why? Because you could share packing centers, because sometimes these things are expensive. So if somebody has a packing center that's underutilized, let's share it. If somebody has a container, one of the biggest problems for us in this region, by the way, is that the containers come in full of all the stuff that we love from Europe. But you know what happens on the back haul? Them going back with nothing, right? And going back empty. And you see, you have to pay for the containers to go both ways. So what we need to find are products that we can put in these containers so that they're going back full, right? I mean, and many of us here, you know, sitting in this room, have some products that we could develop. We could be not sitting in this room right now. We could be sitting on a room on the French Riviera, right? But it's just for us to turn our thoughts into action, or if we have products, to move them to Europe. Lower average marketing costs. Speaking to some of the exporters, they say marketing is one of the biggest things that affects you. If you can't let people know that you have products, how can they know that they need to buy them? And when I spoke to Marie Sharp, she said marketing is the big thing. Once she got help from CaribbeanExport and others in marketing, her sales volumes went up significantly. From a lady who started producing peppers in her kitchen to a lady who's now supplying, like what I saw, figures of $3.8 million worth of sauces. Euros, sorry. And even though the euro may have weakened a little, hey, if I had 3.8 million euros, I'd be on the French Riviera. I wouldn't be here. I have more than that. I should have more, right? I mean, I probably have that much in $1 million, Jamaican dollars. When I last checked, our dollar was 128.2 to the US dollar. Hey, but don't worry, yours is going there. That's a joke, right? That's a joke. So, it's not a joke? Okay. You know, I'll tell you something, though. We don't have a shortage of foreign exchange in Jamaica. We don't. You can get as much as you want. Even though our exchange rate is 128, you can buy and sell it. We have an auction every week. You can buy and sell it. So welcome to Jamaica, ladies and gentlemen. Trade doesn't just have to take place within this region. It can take, outside of this region, it can take place within. Get a Jamaican partner and then export into Europe. Nothing wrong with that. They can get the foreign exchange. Economies of scale. Of course, when we all get together, then you get discounts on large volumes, you get discounts on shipping, you get discounts on everything you do. We all know that. But in this region, some groups do it, but some of us won't do it. We don't trust each other. Why don't we trust each other? I tell people that in business you don't need trust, just get a contract, okay? That's what protects you. Economies of scope, they're there if one set of guys are sending something to Latvia, then you can take advantage of that too at the same time. You know, so everybody can, you know, take advantage of different people going to different places. Okay, so I think everybody gets that. Standards. I think Adam spoke about standards already. Something that's important for you to try to get is the CE label, which means that your goods have the European quality mark. You want to say anything about that, Adam? No? Okay. And when you have that, by the way, once you get into one EU country, whoops, you're gone to every one of them, okay? Quality and standards. You see those oranges in there that don't look so good? Don't try to send those. That might be the last container that you ship, okay? So make sure your stuff is good. The products must meet their standards. These are now no different from anywhere else. Most markets now have more or less the same standards. So you just got to produce to meet those standards. Get your HACCP, get all of the necessary quality standards, and you'll be fine for the EU. And when you're fine for the EU, you can get into other markets. Important matters when exporting. Well, there's a European Community Customs Code, which you're free to look at. There is a single declaration. By the way, we are all moving towards a single declaration very, very soon under the WCO version 3. All of us, all around the world, will have the same single administration format. Has everybody seen that? I think they call it the Euro 1, where you fill out all the stuff. There are projects now to make them exactly the same. So when you leave the Caribbean, it's exactly the same as the one in Europe. Direct transport of goods. Adam, while I drink a little water, talk about that for me, please.
So this actually belongs to the rules of origin domain. And rules of origin, as I mentioned during my presentation, that I will speak a little bit more at the occasion of Noah's presentation. So we are here at the TAC that is organized by TTMA, which is manufacturing association. So I expect that most of you, those participants, are into production and export of goods, or you want to export. So whenever you export to the EU, you have to be aware, or at some point of time, you have to be made aware about rules of origin. And rules of origin, they determine economic nationality of goods. They determine whether your goods qualify for tariff preferences, for tariff zero or duty-free entrance under the IPA. So there will be slides after this one when the notion will be introduced. But one of the requirements of your shipments from the region to the EU is that it should go directly to Europe. However, we know the modern world and modern transport logistics, and in majority of cases it doesn't work like this. So your shipment can be transhipped, and in most cases will be through, for example, United States. So this is allowed, and it's not a problem for exporting to the EU, and it will not make your goods ineligible for getting tariff preferences. However, during this transshipment through third countries, we need to be sure that the consignment, the goods, were not manipulated or altered in a non-authorized way. So for this, we require that the goods need to stay under customs supervision, and normally upon entry to the EU, the customs authorities will require some kind of proof of that. However, once it's transshipped, for example, from Miami, this will be a certificate or a document from American Customs and Border Protection attached to the bill of landing, so it will be automatically complied with. What you can see on this slide, you can see a remark that is marked as important, that a lot of goods shipped from California to the UK or rest of EU do not go directly, but go via the Netherlands. Why it's important? So it's important because it doesn't matter. So how come that it doesn't matter? It's still important. So it is to give you a better notion of European single market and free circulation. Once your goods are cleared for customs at any point of entry to the EU, so they are free to go anywhere within the EU with any additional check or controls. It means that even if you export the parts of the same consignment to 5 or more EU countries at the same time, let it be, I don't know, Belgium, Finland, Cyprus, Malta, and Poland, and they enter through Netherlands. So why, once they are cleared for customs in the Netherlands, they lose the original provenance and they become goods in free circulation. They can go anywhere without additional checks or controls on the internal borders between the port of first entry and the final destination. And there's even more to that. It's not only they can reach markets and consumers not only within the EU, but they can also reach consumers and market in our customs union partners. So who are our customs union partners? I will mention them in alphabetic order. So that's Andorra and San Marino. And I can see that you are not thrilled because, and I don't mean it, and I mean it without an undue disrespect to great nations of San Marino and Andorra, but as great as they certainly are, they are not numerous. And in any way, San Marino and Andorra are a part covered by the IPA on the basis of additional protocols which are attached to the agreement for the goods which are included in the customs union agreement. But there is one more customs union partner to the EU, and namely Turkey. So it's almost 80 million people market, and once your goods are in free circulation in the EU, they have also indirect access to the markets and consumers in Turkey. But just to make it clear, you may ask, so under our IPA, can I export to Turkey? No. If you export something to Turkey and it enters through the Netherlands, it will be not clear for customs in the Netherlands. It will be cleared for customs only at the first entry to Turkey, and it will be subject to all applicable customs duties. But if you export something to the EU and your product becomes good in free circulation, it can reach the market and consumers in Turkey without any customs that would normally be collected on the border. And it's a two-way street. Yesterday I had a walk through the exhibition area, and I met and spoke to some producers from Trinidad, from here, that I think it was about car batteries. They also have manufacturing facilities in Turkey. So everything that is manufactured in Turkey has also duty-free access based on the provision of customs union to the EU. The customs union is somehow limited. It doesn't cover all the goods. It only covers industrialized goods. The agricultural goods are excluded, but anyway, it's a nice addition to the IPA, nice bonus. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, just moving along a little bit. I like that diagram because it shows a highway, and I love highways. When I went to Germany, I enjoyed speeding down the Autobahn. So I rented a car and drove very quickly. No Jamaican policemen to harass me. You could just get on there and move. Now this highway here is showing how foods leave the farm. It shows that they get transported, and when they cross the border, by the way, you have to they check for hormones, chemical residues, the whole lot. Then they reach Europe, and then after that, you see Europeans enjoying the stuff that came from Tuna Puna, okay? And it's just like that. It really isn't as hard as we think, okay? Now, Adam was just talking about rules of origin, and he's going to speak a little bit more about them now, because rules of origin, if you are trying to ship some good from the Caribbean off CARIFORUM to the European Union, we can't come up with some of the little tricks that I know some of my guys in Jamaica would, where you get some Chinese product and ship it up, put it in Jamaican colors and send it off and say, yes, it's made in Frankfield, Clarendon, Jamaica. Right? No, there are certain rules of origin where you have to prove that the product was actually sufficiently produced in CARIFORUM before the European market will allow it to be accessed. So, Adam?
Yes, so then back to rules of origin. So first of all, I will mention why IPA is special or different than any other of our agreements. It's, we made parts on rules of origin more, not user-friendly, but we made sure that we installed there certain features that would benefit CARIFORUM more than we normally allow for in our other agreements. So first of all, we introduce a special type of cumulation in the agreement. It will allow the Caribbean region to use materials and treat them as originating when they come from other developing countries, and other developing countries are those that are shown on this slide. So you can see that are all Central American countries, also Mexico and Colombia and Venezuela. We allowed for higher general tolerance rules for non-originating materials. At that time of the negotiation of this agreement, our standard was only 10% to allow for non-originating materials. We have in our agreement 15%. We also made some specific rules of origin more lenient or more relaxed than we usually allow for vis-a-vis our other partners. So the most prominent example of this are rules of origin for textiles and clothing and apparel. Under our agreements, we allowed only for single transformation. And just for those who are not familiar how textiles are being produced, so it goes all the way from fiber, then to yarn, and to fabric and apparel. So each of this means one transformation, one step of production. And our standard is double transformation, meaning that if you want to sell a T-shirt, you should start the most basic non-originating material that is allowed to be used is only yarn. So you go 2 stages up. With single transformation for using T-shirts, you can use non-originating fabric that can come from any other part of the world. And just to show you how textiles, it's usually a very sensitive sector for most of the economies, also for the European Union. And the only country in the region that has FTA with the United States is Dominican Republic. So if there is any people from Dominican Republic here, I think that they can confirm that their rules of origin in the agreement for textiles with United States provide for triple transformation, whereas we allow here for single transformation. Anyway, just coming back to the notion of rules of origin. So those rules are setting requirements that will make your product eligible for tariff benefits. And in principle, your product may be either originating or maybe fully obtained. Fully obtained applies to fruits, vegetables, or animals because they are not being manufactured. They are either grown or born and raised, or to manufacture goods. And for manufactured goods, rules of origin usually mention in a specified protocol in the agreement working on processing that has to be done in the territory of the country in order for product to be originating. So for this example that we have on the slide, we have a bottle of what is hot paper, right?
Hot pepper.
Hot pepper, how to make sure that it's originating. So for this, we have two scenarios. We have one scenario where I will use the actual rule of origin applicable to HS 220. I think this will be HS 2209, if I'm not mistaken. And also we'll use some other rules of origin just to make you aware of how the system works. So in real life, the rules of origin applicable to this product says that all the papers or vegetable materials used in production of this bottle of hot paper have to be originating. And in practical terms, it will mean that they will have to be fully obtained, meaning harvested and collected in the territory of CARIFORUM. So for that, you don't need to worry about any. Once you comply with that, you don't need to worry about any other production stages that are shown on this clip. You don't have to worry about the origin of the bottle, or you don't need to worry about any service, logistics, and use of machinery that can come from other countries, etc. Once you use hot papers that are harvested in the territory, you are done. You can safely export to the EU, and the origin will be confirmed on the Euro 1 certificate that looks like that. However, there are some other products when the rules of origin, instead of focusing on particular components, will mention something that the value of non-originating materials cannot exceed certain percentage, for example, 40% of the ex-works price of the product. So with this, you need to look at individual components of the products, like price of the bottle, price of the labeling, price of the manufacturing, how much costs to the use of machinery, etc., and to make calculation to check whether whatever was not coming from the region is fitting into this limit of non-originating materials. If you can go back to the previous slide. However, what we take into account only the cost of working and processing. So for us, for the part of the slide that refers to the machinery operations, you count cost of the running of the machinery, but the origin of the machinery doesn't matter, because this is a setup of the factory. So you will look at the labor costs and the cost of running machinery that are needed for production. You will look at the cost of packaging and labeling. You will look at the cost of the content, which is the sauce itself, and that's it. Because this is compared against ex-works price, which is also known as ex-factory, so at the moment when the product leaves the factory. And once you fit into the limit that is specified in rules of origin, in specific rules of origin, you are good and free to export to the EU, enjoying the tariff benefits.
Thank you. So that accumulation process, as they call it, is very important. It means that you can, as Adam said, you can take some things from one country, you can take some things from Europe, you can even get a little bit from outside of the region, as long as you don't exceed a certain amount, and end up with a Belizean product in Europe. Because Marie Sharp actually uses up all the pepper sauce, the pepper, on her farm, and has to go to Guatemala and Mexico to actually get habaneros because she uses it so intensively. Sorry? T-shirts.
I can speak about T-shirt, for example. That would be good to illustrate the single transformation. So speaking about something that is manufactured industrially, like apparel, T-shirts. T-shirts are made of fabrics, and fabric is made of yarn, and yarn comes from fiber. Fiber comes from a plant, etc. So none of Californium state grows cotton, I suppose. So all the cotton would have to be imported, but you'll be interested in producing fabrics, shirts, or T-shirts and exporting into the EU. Under our standard model agreements that we have with other countries, you have to comply with so-called double transformation. So in order to have originating T-shirt, the most basic non-originating materials you would be allowed to use would be non-originating yarn. So you'd have to, for example, import yarn from either United States or China or Pakistan or whenever else from the world, make it into fabric in the region, and only then produce a T-shirt from this fabric. However, under single transformation rule, you have to pass only through one stage of production. So it means that in case of the T-shirt, which is made of fabric, you are allowed to import non-originating fabric and just cut it to the size and sew and to do all the remaining operation, and you will acquire product which, under the terms of the agreement, is originating and feel free to benefit from tariff reductions under the IPA.
Okay, so it does apply to T-shirts. You make T-shirts? Based on what we're thinking, yeah. I mean, by the way, has anybody got any ideas? They love our pepper, you know, so I mean, even though Belize has got the pepper going up there, nothing wrong with a tuna pepper, you know, or...
Yes, but also just elaborating, because perhaps the notion of different types of cumulation was not sufficiently explained, and I don't want to leave you with any kind of confusion. So in principle, we have two types of cumulation in the agreement. We have so-called bilateral cumulation, when we treat materials coming from each other, meaning from the EU and the Caribbean, as originating. It means that you may feel free to use in your working and processing anything that comes from the EU, and it will be treated as coming from the region, and vice versa. So this is bilateral accumulation. We have also a possibility, and this is a special and unique feature of IPA only, of so-called extended accumulation with neighboring developing countries, and this was the one shown on the slide when upon specific conditions, it's not automatic accumulation, but once specific conditions and the are met and the mechanism is set in place, you can use materials input also from those countries.
Thank you very much. We are going to jump into some questions in a minute. We do have quite a few more slides. Before I go on, though, I want to tell you, you'd ask me about trading things other than pepper. Well, there are things like services, okay, which are not like pepper, nor like textiles. I'm going to let you have the Marie Sharp's story, but just to say, she went from her kitchen to now where she's 76, and Marie tells me that she's now setting up her management structure to make sure her kids and family can take over. The most important thing that I learned from Marie Sharp was what happened when her as you look in the one where in the IP issues where her brand got stolen, as I mentioned earlier. She also told me that marketing was the problem for her. She couldn't grow until she was marketing. She also mentioned that the tourism trade really helps. So if you have a product, put it in the tourism shops. When you sell it, the tourists actually go back, use it, and will actually come back. Some have come back and asked to be distributors. So these are some of the things. By the way, she just won an award. The Hot Sauce Pepper Hall of Fame she entered. I mean, that's a big thing in the pepper market. She's now in that. And she goes all over the world. There are other countries in the region. Smacks Luxury Group. They are the creators of chai rum. Everybody know about Smacks? Okay. So if you want to get drunk on something nice, try Smacks Luxury. It's a luxury rum product. Blue Waters from Barbados. Patois Apparel. Patois Apparel is a textile where anybody knows any good Jamaican patois words? I'm not going to give you any other bad words now because I know some of you guys know some of those. But she has T-shirts where she has, you know, nice gal, you know. those kind of things on it. And she doesn't have any of our famous words that most people know when they hear Jamaican people get angry on them. Export of services, I just want to speak about that briefly. Architects and engineers, people like architects and engineers can go into Europe. Now, they were supposed to have signed what we call a mutual recognition agreement with the Europeans, which means the Europeans will recognize the regional architectural qualifications and we recognize theirs. Unfortunately, the arrangements have not yet been signed. I know they've drawn up because I saw them years ago, but they've not been implemented. However, that does not prevent architects and engineers or any professional services from practicing with Europeans. As I said before, they love regional partners. So if there's a bid out there in the Caribbean that a Caribbean firm thinks is too big, find a European partner. Because as was said by Adam earlier, you know, in procurement now, they're making these things competitive across the whole Europe and the Caribbean. For example, me as a consultant, when I bid on projects now, I'm not just competing like I used to be with the guys in Jamaica and the guys in Trinidad. I'm now bidding against guys from Poland, where he comes from. I'm bidding against guys from Macedonia, place I mean I only hear about in the Bible. And people from all over are free to bid on these projects. And so what we have to do is that face up to the facts a lot of times that we cannot compete because sometimes they're required to have $500,000 in the bank, right? Well, I mean, Marie Sharp may have that, but a lot of us don't. So what you have to do is find a strategic alliance with a European company that has all of that. Then you go in with them. And sometimes you don't have to be the junior partner even though they're the bigger one, because if you find the project, then you can invite them to work with you, but you get rid of all of the requirements in terms of capital and the things that make it very difficult for us. So what I'm saying is this: there are barriers, because by the way, if you're trying to apply for a lot of European contracts, the contract documents are like this. And when I see these contract documents like this, ladies and gentlemen, I just smile. I'm happy. You know why? Because I know that most people are not going to take the time to go through it, right? So when I go through it now, I'm competing with relatively few people. I'm giving away my tools and secrets, by the way, here. But don't be intimidated by the documents. Go through it, because once you're through it, you can compete. And I'm going to wrap up now. Just go into a slide that I wanted to show you. I was going to tell you that certain European countries have made it easier for you to get there. Does everybody recognize that athlete? Anybody tell me who it is? That's Merlin Orti-Page. She's now from Slovenia, right? Part of the EU. So people there will know about Jamaica, so don't ignore Slovenia. Trade missions. We have taken trade missions to Europe and to the French Caribbean. By the way, the French Caribbean, close to us, great market. We took some Trinidadian manufacturers and other people down there. They had success. They got business. And these are some of the products that they had business in. And we can see that there were confirmed orders, 6 confirmed orders as a result of that second mission that we went on. Okay? So it does work. Oh, by the way, Martinique and Guadeloupe, those people earn €9 per hour. Eh? That's a lot of money. So they can afford some of our products. Are you ready? That's my last question. You need to be ready. And you see that man there? He's going to run his last race in August in Europe. And that's because he's been ready for a long time. We need to be ready for what we're doing. Okay? So we need to have the production and product readiness, standards, market readiness, marketing, staff, alliances, and the funds. Okay? By the way, a quick one. Cultural issues. Important. Okay? If you're dealing in Germany, don't arrive late like you do in Caribbean. If you want to set a meeting up in Germany, give them 3 months. Okay? Do not try to do missions in July and August because everybody's on holiday. Okay? These are just certain things that I've learned from my own mistakes. By the way, don't lose your Caribbean uniqueness. They like that. Okay? But you still have to be socially sensitive. Okay? So a meeting means a different thing in certain places. Some places, if you have a meeting in the evening over dinner, don't take out your laptop and your stuff to show. It's insensitive, okay? And so you have to know, and by the way, some places don't appreciate long hours of working because they think that you're inefficient. All right? Outsourcing, for example, in Italy, they don't promote it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to finish right there. Use the EU export desk for more information. Thank you very much.
Okay, we just have a few minutes left. Thank you very much, Dr. Watson and Adam Wisniewski. Thank you very much indeed. We have a few questions from our online forum on YouTube, and I'd also like to open it out to the floor in here if you also have any questions for either of these two gentlemen. Any questions?
Really a comment. Good morning, everybody. In all of the talk about EU, I did not hear any mention of language and the importance of the language or being able to speak the language. That is the service that my company exports to Europe, translation of documents, together with cultural. You spoke about the culture and the importance of understanding, doing business with countries and understanding the cultural nuances, and those are two of the services that we provide.
Okay. That's good to know.
Any other questions?
Good morning. I was glad when you talked about dealing with the French Caribbean and French Guiana. The company I work for, we represent two European companies. One Franco-Swedish company, the other one British, which is still in the EU at the moment. I'm very interested in doing work in the French Caribbean and the Dutch and the others. Now, one of the companies I represent, the Franco-Swedish one, I'm not allowed to sell their products in Guadeloupe or Martinique because the department is considered part of France, and so the head office will handle the sales of that. The British company, however, I have the rights, if I wish, to try and sell it in French Guiana, Martinique, and Guadeloupe. So since the product is of origin in Europe, I would like to know, how can I deal with going into Martinique and Guadeloupe to try and sell a European product in there, and what issues I may face, if any?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
To sell a European product in Europe.
Yeah.
But Caribbean Europe.
Yeah.
You know, as far as I know, and I may need some help here, the main problem that you're going to find is, which isn't a problem because everybody faces it, is a tax that they call the octroi de mer. So even though it's a European product going to Europe, there's a sea tax that everybody has to pay called the octroi de mer. So you will have to pay that. But other than that, I don't think there's a problem. What you have to go down there is meet the distributors, which I can give you a few, and people from Trinidad, Export TT can definitely. You go in there, you negotiate with them. If the product isn't there already, which it may be, but you say it's not.
Well, I can't, you see, it's a product and a service. We do flooring. We install floors in health centers, okay. So like any hospitals in the French territories that they usually find in European hospitals, they tend to use this product. But I haven't been to Martinique or Guadeloupe. One, language barrier. I forgot all my French from about 20 years ago. But when I went to St. Lucia a year ago, a businessman told me there that a lot of businesses over there, they do some English. So it's not that much of a barrier. But I'm just more concerned about, okay, I don't want to just go there and then expect, well, because it's a European product, that it will get through. But I said I wanted to talk with CARIFORUM about, well, what issues I may face. So it may be easier than I expect.
I mean, I don't think you'll have a problem. Right. I mean, Trinidad may not like the fact that you're exporting European goods rather than their goods, but if it's making some monies for a Trinidadian, I don't think there's a problem. Yeah. Talk to Export TT because I know they have done it.
Okay.
Okay? Right.
I think if we can take a question from the online forum. I think you might have to help me out with your handwriting. Okay, so.
Apparently there are some people watching us on YouTube more than are in this room.
Okay, the first question is, the CE label, is this a deal breaker, or can we export without the CE mark? Sorry.
The CE mark. The CE mark, as far as I know, is not a deal breaker, but if you have it, it is certainly an advantage to have.
And does this mark only go on manufactured goods, or is it also present on foods and agro-processed goods?
As far as I know, you can get this mark for all kinds of goods. The CE mark is...
I mean, the EC mark, it shows that it conforms with certain safety legislation and safety standards, but itself, it's not a requirement to export. In order to be able to export to the EU, you have to make sure that you comply with all the TBT measures enforced in the EU for your product. And in order to know what are those measures for the product that you want to export, I could see that on one of the last slides, there was a link to the EU Export Help Desk. So this is a very useful website which is accessible for free to any exporter from the region and from other developing partners of the EU, when you can check the requirements applicable to your product on product-by-product basis. So basically speaking, once you access this website, you digit the HS code. And by the way, this website is not correctly written. It should say www.exporthelpdesk.europa.eu. So the word desk is missing. So you introduce 6 or 8-digit coding for your product, and you got list of rules of origin which is applicable to the product, all the technical requirements, TBTs and such. You have all the necessary contact addresses in Europe, because you can also indicate the destination, specific destination in Europe, specific country where you want to export, and you will also have all the necessary information on any other export procedures that are required to be complied with when you export this specific product to the EU.
The second question, how is rent treated in determining rules of origin, given that in the production of goods, this is a very important cost?
Rent?
Rent.
I'll let Adam go again.
So this will come into play only when we deal with the rule of origin that makes reference to the ex-works price. And it will not come into the play when it will refer to specific materials that are used in production. For example, if you have to look at the product that you export, and you have to read what rules of origin apply, and you will have to worry about costs of running your production facility being calculated into this ex-works price only if the rule of origin will say will be constructed in the way that it will make reference to the ex-works, to the percentage limit of non-originating material against the ex-works price. So, for example, if the rules of origin says that manufacture in which the ex-works price of the product of non-originating materials does not exceed 40% of ex-works price of the product, so in this scenario, you will have to calculate individual costs of running of your production facility into this ex-works price and compare it against the value of non-originating materials that were used in your production. But in this sense, the value of running of the labor and the value of running of the facilities will not be treated as non-originating costs. So the highest they will be, it will allow also for the higher margin of non-originating materials. So apart from this being potentially big percentage of your manufacturing operation, this will not undermine your ability to produce an originating product.
In the interest of time, I'll just ask one more question and then we'll move to you. how can we leverage the EPA to ensure that value added stays within the shores of the Caribbean? So oftentimes our EU partners insist that we ship mango puree instead of the finished product.
Well, I'll start off with that. I definitely think that we should start to process more of our raw materials here. In fact, if I had my way, we wouldn't send anything out of our region that hasn't been processed, if I had my way. But I see that the cocoa people and other people are starting to do that, because if you make chocolate out of the cocoa, you make a lot more than just selling the cocoa, and it's a lot cheaper to ship. So we need to start to process more and more of our products. Marie Sharp, pepper sauce, but we need to deepen our manufacturing, because there's higher value added that stays here and more money that stays here. And people like to know that they're paying for something produced right here, okay? So that the chocolate isn't, Caribbean cocoa, but, it's done in Belgium and Switzerland, and everything else about it becomes Swiss. We need to do a lot of it right here. So it's Caribbean chocolate through and through. There was a question here.
Hi, Donna Ghani, European Business Chamber. We're here at TIC for the very first time, and we've had great responses and endless questions from persons, including what are the labeling requirements for Europe. It kind of follows on with what was asked before, but interestingly, a number of people have asked if we go according to the requirements now for anywhere in Europe, if we are exporting to the UK, what happens with Brexit? Do things change with the divorce?
That's a nice question. We agreed before this meeting started that all Brexit questions would go to Mr. Brexit.
Unfortunately, I think you arrived a little bit later, so you didn't hear that part. But.
So as in principle, I mean, what you ask for, what are the Brexit implications for export to Europe for...
Labeling requirements. What are the labeling requirements?
Labeling requirements.
Sorry?
Okay, so then... okay. So focus on labeling requirements instead of Brexit itself. So, so right now, labeling requirements or any other technical requirements, for that matter, are harmonized throughout the European Union. So they are the same in 28 member states, including the UK. As we are all aware, the UK is in the process of negotiations of the agreement for withdrawal from the European Union. And for this, we cannot predict what will be the nature or specific specificities of trade relationships for after this process, as it's subject to negotiation, and the outcome cannot be predicted and should not be speculated on. However, and this is a question that should be asked more to the UK authorities for after the Brexit, for the period after the Brexit, is whether they will be able to maintain the standards that they had as a member of the European Union, or whether they would be willing to modify it to something else. So it's still too early to ask this question because the negotiations are going on and we don't know with what we will end up. And then it will be left to the United Kingdom's authorities to decide what to do with the standards, European standards that right now are part of the national United Kingdom's legislation. So that's the only answer that I can give.
Okay, I think, what time have we got now?
There was one question over there.
We've literally, we've got 1 minute left. So I'm just going to just have one last question.
Thanks. It's not really a question. I'm from the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality. Basically, it represents the network of the bureaus of standards in each member state. Most of the countries in the world have a bureau of standards, and for your quality infrastructure questions with standards, you just need to go to your bureau of standards and ask for assistance, because all the bureaus of standards in the world are linked up. So if they don't have the answer, and most probably they may not, because they wouldn't have the answers for another market, they would be easily able to pick up the phone, contact one of their counterparty officers to help you out. So every country has a bureaus of standards. People tend to look on these bureaus as regulatory organizations, and they're not. They're mostly business support organizations. They're mostly trade support infrastructure institutions. So we'd recommend that you go to your bureaus of standards, and they will help you to find the answer for your issues. A lot of these standards in the world basically are harmonized. So if the UK separates from the European Union, the British Standards Institute will probably still adopt the European standard, but just carry it under their flag. Because for the European standard to have formed in the first place, they would have used the UK standard, which would have been tied to the ISO standard. So the standard separation process in the Brexit may not be as complex as thought. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Noel Watson. I think we have to come to a close. I think it's been a very productive morning, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. So Dr. Noel and Adam will be around outside if you do have any questions. We also have a stand in the TIC room, Pavilion 7, so please feel free to come across there and pose any of your questions to any members of the team. We will be posting the presentation that was delivered today on our website, CaribbeanExport.com. So if you haven't already registered on our website, please do go to the website and register there so that you receive that presentation. And with that, I'd like to close the session. Thank you very much for your time and your attention.